Welcome to the Mile High Flight Show, where a Jets fan and a Broncos fan get together to talk about the NFL and the world of sports. I'm your host, Ryan Marinholtz, joined as always by my wonderful co-host, Enrique Cisneros. And let's jump right into this. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, bro. Just excited to do this on a beautiful July 3rd, which is also my younger brother's birthday. I just want to tell him happy birthday, Isaiah. Um, I know I'm recording this on your birthday, and so I appreciate you and everything you do. And yeah, happy birthday. And yeah, I'm obviously excited to talk about the NFL, and then later on, we get to talk about that fight card. So yeah, I'm stoked.
Heck yeah. Happy birthday, Isaiah. That's awesome. And let's jump right into it. So we can start off with our weekly questions here. Which NFC East wide receiver will have the best year? Obviously, we're going into our NFC East breakdowns starting with this week. And so, a lot of good wide receivers across that division. Figured we'd ask. And out of the choices, we have Scary Terry McLaurin, CeeDee Lamb, Devonta Smith, and Kenny Galladay. And on social media, you guys chose Terry McLaurin. And what do you think, Enrique?
I mean, if I'm being honest with you, I'm surprised CeeDee Lamb didn't get the nod a bit more. I figured Devontae and Scary Terry would be like the leading choices, but I'm really surprised CeeDee Lamb didn't get any more votes. I personally think CeeDee Lamb is probably going to have the best year, and that's just based off the quarterback play. You know, nothing against Carson Wentz. I was literally going to say whoever the fuck they have in Washington. Um, but we always shit on Carson Wentz, and we got to stop doing that. So, you know, and obviously, like I'm a huge fan of Jalen Hurts and everything that Philadelphia's got going on, but I just think that Dak Prescott has been consistent as far as when he's on the field. Uh, I don't know where you put Dak, but he's like top 10 in the NFL, right? Like quarterback wise, he's got to be at least in the top 10.
Somewhere in
So
there.
yeah, like I'm not gonna argue where you have him. I can't even really say where I have Dak Prescott right now. But yeah, I think that CeeDee Lamb especially with the trade of Amari Cooper. I think that that's going to be a huge, a pivotal thing in CeeDee Lamb's season. Is now he's going to be looked to as the number one wide receiver. And so, yeah, I think that this is the opportunity that he has to really make good on that and make good on the draft capital that they used to draft him. And yeah, I think that this is CeeDee Lamb's time. But I do see why people are picking Scary Terry, and I thought I saw some comments too about Devontae Smith, and I could see why both those guys. But yeah, how do you feel about it, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can see arguments for really, I guess any of them. Kenny Galladay, it's interesting because I will say I only put Kenny Galladay on there because he was the Giants' leading wide receiver last year. But they had a tough year with injuries, and so his production just like looked odd next to everyone else's. He had like 500 yards and zero touchdowns, and like so he was only technically the lead receiver because their entire wide receiver core just got like decimated last year. So we'll have to see what the Giants' weapons can do, and we'll go into that during the breakdown here. But with that said, I can see arguments for both Terry McLaurin and CeeDee Lamb, like you said, especially CeeDee Lamb when it comes to, like you mentioned, the Amari Cooper trade. So that leaves all this space now for CeeDee Lamb to take that number one spot and a lot more responsibility on, and he seems up to the task. And so, that'll be exciting to see, and I think that's definitely a solid reasoning why you would expect him to be the uh, you know, leading wide receiver in this division for that. And then Terry McLaurin, I can also see the argument that, like you said, Carson Wentz, everybody does kind of crap on him and they make fun of him, including ourselves, you know, but he has shown flashes of talent. And when he can put it all together, he still has the potential to be. He was running on basically an MVP level ish run during that Super Bowl run before his ACL injury. And so he's put together good football. And if he can recapture that especially with a weapon like Terry McLaurin, and at bare minimum, like Carson Wentz of the Colts last year is a upgrade than anything that I can think of that Terry McLaurin has had at quarterback before. You talk about what Taylor Heineke, I mean Alex Smith, but he was not as effective coming back. Obviously, happy he was able to come back, but just a different quarterback at that point. So he didn't have Alex Smith when he was healthy, and I think he's had what Ryan Fitzpatrick for a game or two as quarterbacks.
Right.
I'm struggling to think all the quarterbacks that he's even had. Like he's really had, I don't want to say bottom of the barrel, but just struggling quarterback play. And so Carson Wentz is an upgrade from all of that at bare minimum. And Terry McLaurin has made do and gotten decent stats with that kind of quarterback play. So it'll be interesting. I can see arguments for both for sure. And I mean, like you said, Devonta Smith, we'll get in with the Eagles, but um, yeah, I don't know. I would pick. I feel like I would pick C.D. Lamb. To be honest with you, I agree with you that just the exit of Amari Cooper combined with the quarterback play of Dak Prescott, which is the best in the division, I think that puts it over for me. So yeah, and then we can move on to our second question here. Which Broncos player will make their first Pro Bowl? And the options were Patrick Surtain II, Jerry Jeudy, Draymond Jones, or Javonte Williams. And on you guys chose Patrick Surtain II. What are you thinking, Lincoln?
Yeah, I think it's got to be PS2. Just based off of what he showed last year as a rookie. I think he's just gonna build on top of that, and we talked about it before, and we've talked about great young corners like AJ Terrell and guys who have took a little time to become a good corner in the league, at least their first 2 years. Pat Surtain did it right away. As a rookie, he was a very, very, very good corner, and so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and fully agree that I think PS2 will make his first Pro Bowl of many, and yeah, I just think he's a guaranteed lockdown corner, going forward. And, kudos to the Broncos for having him on their team.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about that decision in the drafts to you had Justin Fields on the board, and everybody wanted, including me, to be honest with you at the time, wanted the Broncos to take Justin Fields, and then you look at it now, you have Russell Wilson on your team, and you have Patrick Surtain, who's looking to be a future top 5 corner in the league. You know what I mean, for a long time, um, and so it's funny how stuff works out sometimes. And in this case, sometimes it doesn't work out the way it does or you want it to. But in this case, it worked out exactly how George Payton wanted it to. And he's got his quarterback in now. He's got his lockdown corner too. And yeah, I think all those other guys have good chances. Jerry Jeudy, obviously, with Russell Wilson coming over, as do you could, to be honest with you, put almost any of those wide receivers on there. If like, depending on which one that are ones that Russ meshes with the best. I mean, you could see KJ Hamler, you could see Tim Patrick, or Jerry Jeudy make their first Pro Bowls. And then, I mean, Draymond Jones, we've just been looking for him to take that next step. And Javonte Williams, it's possible, especially with him having likely the number 1 carries this year. Um, but yeah, I think Patrick Surtain just showed, like, there's a lot of people that think Patrick Surtain could have been a Pro Bowler last year, but got snubbed just because he's a rookie and there was other more deserving veterans. You know what I mean? So we'll have to see what happens, but I would tend to agree. So that will do it for our weekly questions there. And then we can move on to our sports news, starting with the NFL. The driest week that I think I can remember during the span of our show so far, 16 episodes in. And we have really one big story, and it does pertain to the division that we're talking about right now. And the wide receivers we just talked about earlier. Scary Terry McLaurin agrees to a 3-year extension worth up to $70 million, and he'll receive $53 million in guaranteed money and earn $23.3 million a year I don't know exactly where that puts him on like the top 10 of wide receiver salaries, but it's got to be somewhere in there. He's not the highest paid because what Tyreek was like 27 something.
I thought Tyreek cracked 30, dog.
Did he? I
I thought
I can
Tyreek cracked
never
30, and then Devontae was at like 28
something
or
like
something
that.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
it's low key kind of ridiculous.
right. Yeah, so Scary Terry's not quite up there, but I mean more than respectable for sure. And yeah, I mean I like that. Well, I mean, if you ask me, I think he should have gone to a different team, to be honest with you. But if he's
Ooh,
going to stay, I like that he made it a 3 year deal. He got pretty good market value, didn't demand like, you know, number one ride or not like number one as in on the team, but number one overall. I'm the best wide receiver in the league money, like 32 or whatever we're talking about. Um,
right.
but yeah, I mean, it's I guess in that sense, like a team friendly deal, even though it's still $70 million for over 3 years. But he's worth it. And I mean, if you're going to be on the Washington Redskins and, um, you
The
know,
Washington Commanders.
or yes, Redskins, football team, Commanders. I kind of like football.
Redskins football.
I'm
I
still,
like football team too.
right. Like, it's almost the best of the bunch. All right. But yeah, I mean, you know, nothing really bad to say there other than just like, I'm worried for his future in terms of being one of those wide receivers. If Carson Wentz doesn't work out, if they can't find, they also have Sam Howell, which we'll talk about when we cover the Commanders as well. But if they can't find a long term solution, I just don't want to see his career go to waste because you never like to see that. You think about like the early years with D Hop in the Texans is kind of the similar situation. It's like you see him almost overcoming the lack of talent at quarterback, but you're like, what could this guy be paired with Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, something like that. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, absolutely.
but good for him. And then I guess with that, we can move right on to our NBA news, and we got a ton to go through. So, first few contracts here: Zion Williamson of the Pelicans, Darius Garland of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then John Morant of the Memphis Grizzlies. So they all sign, so those first three sign pretty much identical contracts, which is 5 year rookie extensions for 193 million, worth up to 231 million, just based on their achievements during the contract. If they reach like all stars or all NBA teams and things like that. And yeah, it looks like it's pretty much an identical contract for those guys. So good for them, all well deserved. I'm excited to see what
All
all of them can do going forward. But like Zion is the only one I'm like, you're like, you have any questions about whatsoever, but he's still Zion. You know what I mean? I have no issue with it.
I have a slight issue with it.
You do? Yeah, that was the only one I was like, maybe.
I have a slight issue with it, but it's not as much of an. I just haven't seen enough of him,
Yeah,
and that's my only complaint. I'm not mad that he got the money. Like his potential overall is worth the money, especially on that rising Pelicans team. Like look what they did. Look what the noise they made against the Suns in the playoffs, and that was without him. So
yeah.
having him back play. I mean, honestly, even if he's half as good as what we saw, could still be a pretty decent force in the NBA. And like I don't know, it's easier to pay him and figure it out than it is to not pay him and have to figure that out. So I do know
Yeah,
why he did it. I do know why you do it if you're the Pelicans. So yeah, but yeah, shout out to John Morant. I think that and Darius Garland too.
yeah.
He's playing on the Cavs. At least John Morant's playing on the Grizz. But yeah, all of them. Two of them for sure. Zion a little bit less, but all of them deserving.
for sure. And Darius Garland underrated, just straight up. You know, he like was not great when he first came into the league, but he rapidly improved as a player, and was an all-star this past year and has just looked really good. And I think he, you know, the potential is sky high. So I'll be excited to see what they can put together. They have a interesting young core over there as well. That's starting to get built and got some free agents as well. Uh, and then yeah, I mean obviously John Morant with Memphis, and you saw what they did. They got something going as well. Look to be a potential perennial contender going forward. So, but moving on here, two more contracts. So Karl Anthony Towns of the Timberwolves, and then Devin Booker of the Suns agree to like almost the same contract as each other again, which is a 4-year, $224 million supermax extension with their respective teams. And then in Devin Booker's case, he still has 2 years on his existing contract, which is going to make his total $295 million over 6 years. So he is a very rich man now. And an interesting note about these two contracts. So both of them share the same agent, Jessica Holtz, and she is the first female player agent to ever secure a max or supermax contract in the NBA. And she did it twice on the same day with both of these guys securing supermax deals. So just a bit of history there. You know, I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Jessica Holtz. Can I just say one thing? Before I saw the news, because you texted me about Rudy. Before I was
Yeah.
literally gonna text you back and say what happened to Cat then, but then I saw the news that he signed the deal, and I was like, ooh, keeping them both, okay. And then the only thing I have to say about Devin Booker is that Drake thing that
Yeah.
Drake called him out on that song. That's the only thing I can think of when I hear Devin Booker's name. I just know Drake called him out on that song. And I know it has nothing to do with sports at all. And congrats on the bags to both those guys. But that Drake shit was vicious, dude. Like that's all I can think of when I think of Devin Booker, dog. It's
It's
just
pretty funny. I know
crazy.
I can't unhear it when I hear that song now. That's what I'll think of as well. But
Because I
yeah,
love
no,
D Book so much, dude.
I know, right? Yeah, well, and like the whole kind of rap game, and especially Drake with his whole Toronto Raptors fanhood, is just kind of like part of the NBA culture too. You know what I mean? It's like almost part of the whole thing. So,
Drake like is
but
a player at the point.
right, pretty much. Um, yeah, so yeah, congrats to both those guys, well deserving. And yeah, I do think that that's an interesting situation over there with the Timberwolves. We'll get to that a little bit later here. So, a couple more stories. Bradley Beal agreeing to a 5-year, $251 million max extension with the Washington Wizards. I, dude,
I hate this.
why? Why?
I hate this.
Just get
I hate
out
this
of
so
there.
much.
I just like I mean, it's almost like the same conversation as Terry McLaurin. But like, I'm super happy for him to have gotten the money and the security that comes with that. You know what I mean? That's awesome. I'm happy for him. But like, if you wanted to compete, it just does not seem realistic on that Washington Wizards team. So like, if he wanted to have a chance to actually compete, this was his opportunity to. He declined his player option, and his options were to sign this max back with the Washington Wizards, or he could go wherever he wants. He could go to, well, I don't know if that's really a fit, but you could go to the Lakers. I'm sure they'd take
He'd
you.
go to the Lakers.
Go to the Lakers. You could go to the Celtics. Like, go anywhere. Go
Stop
to
the
the Heat.
Celtics. Oh my goodness.
Like, but no. Congrats, congrats to my guy. I'm kind of sad for him, but he's earning that cheddar, and that's what matters at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
I do feel you, and you already know what I like. I agree 1,000%. Like what is that Damian Lillard meme? It's like God gives his toughest battles to his toughest soldiers.
See, yeah,
Like
it's so good.
that's what I feel like is happening with Bradley Beal. Like, but at this point with Bradley Beal, it's like I even think like God would be like, "Dang dog, you still alive? You still hanging in there?" Like
Right.
the Washington Wizards are so bad, but um, I do agree. I am glad that my dude got the bag, and that is all that matters ultimately. Is these guys have lives afterwards, and if dude, okay, let me just make this argument. To be just the greatest franchise player ever, that's still an accomplishment. You know what I mean? Like, is he gonna get a ring? Probably not. Probably not. But ultimately, he's gonna secure that bag. He makes a difference in the community. Bradley Beal's a great guy.
It's true.
Um, he's an awesome player. Love to see him go the fuck off, even though his teammates are fucking what's his name? Kyle Kuzma.
Kyle Kuzma.
Oh no, Kuzma got traded, didn't he?
Dude, I don't even know it.
I know.
Like,
Shout out Kyle Kuzma.
shout
But
out
yeah,
Kyle
shout out
Kuzma.
to Beal. Just hang in there, dog. Just hang in there. I love you.
No, but speaking of Washington Wizards and trades, you know what I'm really sad about with this Bradley Beal deal is that if Bradley Beal had gone somewhere else, Monte Morris would have been the best player on the Washington Wizards, and I would have been here for that.
And
But
I would have
now,
been here for that.
now he's only the second best player on the Washington Wizards. So, with that, one more story here before we get to big old Rudy Gobert. Uh, my favorite story here of the entire thing, two-time MVP and greatest player on earth, Nikola Jokic, signs the largest deal in NBA history, a 5-year, $270 million supermax contract. And he still has 1 year left on his current contract. So his total is worth 6 years, $303 million. Good Lord. We love it. I mean, the dude was drafted during a Taco Bell commercial, and now he's signed the largest NBA contract in history. I mean, what else is there to say?
I agree. I agree. Shout out to the back to back MVP winner. Shout out to the Joker and that fucking bag, dude. And 6 years, 303. Like
303
Denver
with the
zip code is
Colorado.
303. Come
Bro,
on, come on
it's
now.
too perfect. I mean, yeah, I'm almost willing to bet like Jokic had no idea that's even a thing, but it just like
No,
happens to
it's
be perfect. It's just destiny, is what it is.
well, and let me. Jokic's the greatest player in Nuggets history already, right?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Well, I think
Like,
like I think the MVPs put it over the top, really.
right? Like he was like right there with Melo right before he won his first MVP, and then when he won his first MVP, it was like, okay, yeah, probably. And then the second one was like, oh no, for sure,
Yeah,
best franchise player ever.
yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, but I mean, if we don't get that dude a chip, I need him to win. That's all I want. It's just like I just want him to, and I almost have a feeling he's going to be that player that gets a championship, and he's like, I've achieved everything I came here to do. Goodbye. I'm going to go race horses in Serbia, and like I'm here
Right.
for it. I just want that for him. You know what I mean? At this point, I don't even need the dynasty. Just take the one championship. But if we can't get in that championship, I'm gonna feel like we as a city have failed Nikola Jokic.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But I mean, honestly, you guys need Bradley Beal.
Dude,
Trade trade Aaron Gordon. Hear me out. Trade Aaron Gordon. Trade. Ooh. Trade Bones.
no, no,
Sorry, dog.
no.
Trade Bones for Bradley Beal and maybe like 2 firsts. However, you know how the NBA first round picks are.
I don't
And
even know if we can fit all that contract though, like with because we're
with
paying
yeah, because Bradley
Murray,
Beal
and
just signed that giant fucking
so
contract too.
instead of
Okay,
Bones,
never
just give
mind.
him MPJ. Like just shoot MPJ over there.
For
Just
Bradley
fine.
Beal, straight up like that.
Yeah, and then I keep Bones. It's like a
Okay,
best case
keep
scenario.
Bones. MPJ goes. Yeah, I could be okay with that.
That's I will accept those terms and conditions. That would be fantastic.
But
No, but Bradley Beal has been one of those players that like it feels like for what like the past 3 maybe even 4 years, Nuggets fans like every time the free agency comes through and then every time the trade deadline comes through, people or Nuggets fans are always talking about Bradley Beal. You know, like we want Bradley Beal, and he just never leaves, ever.
I know, like, well, and then what the fuck was the point of declining the player option and saying that you're going to test free agency to just sign a 5-year max extension?
Well,
What
I,
was
I don't I
what was
don't
the
understand. Like I will start with I don't understand NBA contract stuff because it's like absurdly complicated for no reason, and I want to get more into it, but like I haven't. But I do I am of the understanding that in order to sign this like max contract, he had to decline the player option because that player option would have been like a continuation of the current contract. So then he would have to do like an extension. There's something about like the negotiations of it. So like by declining the player option, then they could just do a brand new contract, which is what he signed here. You know what I mean? It's like
right?
something along those lines. It's like that stuff is way over my head, but yeah. Um, I mean, well deserved. Good for him, and then good for Nikola Jokic. And we better get him that dang championship. And then now on to the story we were teasing a little bit earlier with the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Utah Jazz trade center Rudy Gobert to the Minnesota Timberwolves for Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverly, Jared Vanderbilt, Leandro Bolmaro, pick 22 of this year's draft, Walker Kessler from Auburn, shout out, and
Shout out.
four first round picks, 3 of which are unprotected in 2023, 25, and 27, and then one top 5 protected pick in 2029. So a ton of capital goes over to the Jazz for Rudy Gobert. And before I say my piece, I want to hear what you think of it.
About the trade.
Yeah, just about all this.
Um, I love that Patrick Beverly got traded
Yeah,
because I hate Patrick Beverly.
true.
I hate that Patrick Beverly got traded to the Jazz because I have a secret crush on the Utah Jazz.
No.
I don't know what this means on how the Jazz are going to rebuild around Donovan Mitchell. So that's one thing I'm excited to see is how they're going to put pieces around Spida to make this a new look team because they were consistently getting into the playoffs. And, whether they just couldn't work with each other anymore or it was just time to finally do something. Also, didn't their fucking coach just retire or like step down?
Yeah, and then they replaced him with an assistant from the Celtics whose name is escaping me.
So that's another thing that we're going to have to watch going into the season as well is that's a lot of change for the Utah Jazz. But ultimately, as long as Jordan Clarkson's okay. But yeah, I mean, I think for the Timberwolves, I think it's a great move, dude. I think it really I love Anthony Edwards. I love D'Angelo Russell. I think that Cat is like randomly spotty sometimes, but I think he plays pretty good throughout the season. And I think he's kind of getting into his rhythm in the playoffs now that they're starting to become a bit more of a contender in the playoffs. And I think Rudy Gobert has like a very consistent presence that he could bring to that locker room and bring to, obviously what he does really well, which is, you know, fuck shit up in the middle. So, um, yeah, but I mean, we all really can't wait to see what you think about this trade concerning the Utah Jazz.
Yeah, no, I mean, like for me, the number one priority here is that like I think the Jazz traded the wrong player. If I'm being honest with you,
Damn.
like just straight up, like I'm gonna be that inflammatory about it. I think Rudy Gobert is the better player of him and Mitchell. Yeah, as a Nuggets fan, it makes me happy because I feel like not only did you trade the better player, in my opinion, in Gobert, because I feel like he's a defensive piece that you need to win championships. Like you look at the Golden State Warriors of this past year, you know what I mean? They don't win this chip without Draymond. They don't win without that defensive presence, in my opinion. And I think that Gobert can be that for a team like the Timberwolves, who has Cat, who is like a historically prolific scorer as a center from the 3 point line, I would say, like particularly, you know what I mean, is his strength. But then he is not as strong on the defensive side and lacks what you really prefer from a franchise center on that end. So to me, pairing that with Rudy Gobert, who's basically like the opposite, where he's like, defensive player of the year type defensive player and not that great on offense. I think that lets you do a lot offensively, and well, just in general. And I think that like championship wise, he may be the piece that really puts them into being a true contender. Because I think this year in the playoffs, you saw the potential, and then I think you want to see Anthony Edwards develop more. And if he turns into what a lot of people think that he can turn into now with Rudy Gobert, the Timberwolves are a serious team. And the funny part is, I don't even think Cat needs to be the best player. Like you could talk about Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert being the two best players on a Timberwolves championship team, in my opinion. But uh, to go back to the Jazz is like, I kid, I don't like the Jazz. I don't kid about that because I don't like the Jazz because I'm a Nuggets fan. But I kid about like how much I don't like them. Uh, but this is a good trade in the sense that it relieves the tension, and then you get a lot of value back for first round picks, with one being a top five protected, and then a ton of different players back, and Walker Kessler, which is the interesting part I find about this trade for Minnesota. Walker Kessler is a defensive center, and he is probably not going to amount to too much offensively, and he's certainly not like I don't project him to be a Rudy Gobert, but he kind of is a similar-ish presence to like he's like a Rudy Gobert light potentially. He could
Huh.
develop into that. You know what I mean? As far as like he's good at blocking shots, he's good at shutting down around the rim, and he's got good mobility for his size, but not like fantastic mobility for his size. So I don't know, but I mean, yeah. Overall, in my opinion, I think both teams won the trade because they got what they wanted out of it. Um, but I think that the Timberwolves maybe could have gotten a better value. Yes.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. I don't know. I guess we'll just have to see. I do really like it for the Timberwolves though. I don't know.
Me
I
too.
yeah.
And a lot
I
of
guess
people
we'll just
don't.
have to see.
That's the funny part is I see a lot of people like crapping on this, like the Timberwolves got absolutely fleeced, and I just don't view it that. And I think that's because I'm a lot higher, obviously, than a lot of people on Rudy Gobert, like just on the impact that that level of defense can have on your team, especially with championship aspirations. Because I think that's a piece you have to have to win championships is that defense. And he's got now like people pointed out how he like underperformed quotations in the playoffs this year and in other years, but in Utah, everything around him defensively was failing, and now in Minnesota, he has like at least decent pieces. Like we talk about Cat as being like terrible on defense. He's just bad for a center. Like he's not, and obviously he can't cover on the perimeter. Like, but he's not like a leaky faucet. You know, like he's not awful. Um, and then everyone around him on the Timberwolves, like they have a decent team defensively. Um, so I think that you're going to see Gobert even maybe take a step up with the Timberwolves. I really do like that trade for, I guess, for both sides, just because of the, like I said, they get what they want out of it. But I'm really interested to see this new look Timberwolves for sure. So moving on to a Lakers story here. Russell Westbrook will exercise his $47.1 million option to return to the Lakers for the 2022 season. Enrique, it's all yours.
I'm not mad about it at all. I mean, I ultimately do think that I mean, it's an understatement to say that Russ struggled last year. Um, do I think that Russell Westbrook is the main cause of why the Lakers underperformed last year? No. I think that is more on AD, if I'm being honest with you. But I will say that Russ didn't help the fact that AD was hurt a lot, and sometimes when he was on the court, AD just wasn't effective. Um, so yeah, do I ultimately think he's going to be a Laker next year? I don't know. I guess that just kind of depends, honestly, on LeBron. If LeBron feels like he can keep Russell Westbrook and add someone else to the team that can help them win, like a Kyrie Irving or because LeBron's not gonna he's not gonna be quiet about this. The Lakers are gonna have to do something, and I think if they can keep Russell Westbrook on the team while still getting someone, I think they will. I don't necessarily think that's the case. Honestly, I was kind of low key crossing my fingers about John Wall, but obviously John Wall signed to the JV team, so can't really say too much about that, which really sucks. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of like 50-50 on it because I don't necessarily think that to advance to where we'd like to be next year, I don't know that we can keep him on our team while adding someone of a high caliber player. If we're able to do that and keep Russell Westbrook, I'm okay with that. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it all just depends. How do you feel about it? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think people gave Russ a lot of crap last year, including myself. And he got all the nicknames and all that. I think obviously he's still a very talented player. I think for his role in it all, like you said, it's not like he's the single reason that the Lakers weren't successful last year. But I do think that he could do a better job from my outside perspective, looking in at fitting into a role that helps the team and being more efficient about the shots that he takes and like the choices that he makes during the game. Because I think a lot of what you saw last year was Russ just kind of doing Russ and just doing his thing. And it results in inefficient basketball in terms of, wasting possessions. And we're talking about a championship team. And especially when you're talking about a team that Russ is then being relied to be like an important piece on when AD isn't there, or when you're struggling with injuries. I think he can't have that. You know what I mean? So if he can do a better job of like a perfect example to me, and something that I've brought up multiple times because I think it's funny that they were on the same team, is he needs to, in my opinion, Russell Westbrook needs to do exactly what Carmelo Anthony did, which was go from being a kind of like me guy and a me scorer and wanting the ball and wanting to uh, not hog it, but at times, you know what I mean, and just like do their own thing with the ball. They turned into role players. or Carmelo Anthony did. He let go of the ego, and he said, "Okay, I don't have the same ability, so I can't like lead a team anymore. What like how can I fit into a specific role that is going to be more beneficial? You know what I mean? I think that's exactly what Russell Westbrook needs to do to be more effective for the. And I don't think he's do like the exact same role, obviously that Carmelo did because he's not like spot on 3-point shooter. But like, I think he needs to be more of like just that like playmaking point guard that makes the efficient, uh, long 2-pointer or the efficient layup and dunk or whatever. You know what I mean? If you can't find a passing option, but like primarily just be the playmaker. I think that's really what he needs. I mean, correct me if you feel differently.
Yep. I don't know, Doc. I don't know. I guess we're just gonna have to see.
Yeah, I suppose we'll see. And then our next story, John Wall agrees to, like you brought up, a 2-year, $13.2 million contract with the JV team, the Los Angeles Clippers. And I mean, yeah, I mean, he kind of got held hostage over in Houston for a little bit there. Um, so, I'm glad to see him get out, but the Clippers are low key looking really good now. With Kawhi coming back, PG getting going, they still got what Zubac. They got Reggie Jackson on the second wave there. Like a ton of good players that they're actually gonna probably make noise this upcoming year if everybody can actually stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I do love me some Kawhi Leonard. I wish, honestly, I wish the Clippers didn't have their big three that they have because I love them all. I love Paul George. I love his nickname, PG-13. I love Kawhi Leonard. I love his robotic laugh. And I love John Wall because John Wall is heavily tattooed, and I love heavily tattooed anything. So, um, yeah, I'm devastated that John Wall did this to me. But yeah, I mean, I do agree. I do think the Clippers can make some noise. And plus, Paul George was low key starting to look a little bit like Paul George last year. And I'm not saying that. I don't know what I'm expecting from Kawhi Leonard anymore. Um, I know that he was hurt last year, and so I'm excited to see what happens with him coming back. But yeah, and then honestly, I guess it's just we're just really gonna have to see how this team comes together, because for whatever reason, it sometimes feels like Paul George and Kawhi have a hard time meshing, and then you throw John Wall into this mix now, and then whatever other pieces they're gonna bring around those guys. But I also love that they got John Wall on the cheap too, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, on all accounts, it's a good deal. It's a good fit. It's like, why the Clippers? Why John?
Why?
But yeah, I mean, good for him, obviously, and good for the Clippers. And like I said, they're probably going to be making noise. I mean, as long as everybody stays healthy, it's almost a given, even without John Wall. But now they're really going to be a force. And that West is looking really competitive. Especially you talk about the Nuggets being back in it. You talk about the Clippers being back in out of injury. Memphis is going to be in it now. Golden State is still hanging around. The Suns are going to be back in it. I mean, I'm sure I'm still missing teams, but like, the West is just so stacked right now.
Yeah, the West is stacked, and I mean, until further notice, the Warriors are, obviously they're the champs, so I don't even I don't know how anyone beats them after the way Andrew Wiggins played last year. They're gonna have James Wiseman back. Um, Gary Payton the second. I love that move for Portland, and I love that move for Gary Payton the second. And I love that the Warriors lost his ass. So the thing is, I think he's a decent role player, and I think he's going to continue to develop pretty well, especially up in Portland. They don't ask him to do too much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll have to see what kind of, how it can develop there. But And especially with Dame hanging around, that's good player to be around. And then our next player here, Bruce Brown, agreeing to a 2-year, $13 million contract with the Denver Nuggets. Love it for the Nuggets, some solid wing presence there coming up from the Nets. Yeah, I can't complain too much about that one.
Yeah, not too bad. Um, yeah, I mean, I like the Nuggets make small moves, but ones that matter. You know what I mean? So I think this is a good one for the Nuggets as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Feels a position of need for sure. And then the bigger trade that the Denver Nuggets made this week, trading Will Barton and Monte Morris for Kentavious Caldwell Pope and Ish Smith from the Washington Wizards. And yeah, I mean, this one, it's interesting because so you talk about Will Barton, longest tenured Nugget, no longer at this point, but was. Uh, and he does a lot of the same things as Contavious Caldwell Pope, but I think KCP is more consistent, and that was really Will Barton's biggest struggle throughout his time as a Nugget was just the consistency. He would have his off games and on games, and he could really look like one of the like top 3-4 best players on the floor when he was really having a good game, but he wasn't consistent with it almost ever. And so it was time for him to go. He gets sent off alongside Monte Morris, who has been a very solid backup point guard for us, and this year starting point guard due to Jamal Murray being out the whole year. Um, and so yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, he's pretty much like Washington's second, third best player right now, in my opinion. He's a good player. So I'm a little sad to see him leave, and I think it was kind of more like the Nuggets wanted to trade Will Barton for Contavious Caldwell Pope, and then they also had to give up Monte Morris and just kind of like Ish Smith is kind of a nice sweetener because Ish Smith, little tidbit for the trade. Ish Smith will set the record for most franchises played with an NBA team at 13 with his Nuggets debut. So kind of crazy. Like he's just kind of bounced around the league, and it's not like he's a bad player. He's just a solid backup point guard that's not gonna you know do anything too crazy for you, but he gets the job done. So you're kind of taking a little bit of a downgrade when it comes to Monte Morris's position with backup point guard, but then you upgrade with Kentavious Caldwell Pope over Will Barton and get a nice 3-and-D piece uh, who can guard a little bit bigger players than just guards too. So yeah, I mean, I do like this. Kind of like you said, is like this is almost a small move on the surface, but it's an impactful one for one of our biggest weaknesses last year and one of the reasons that we could only win one game against Golden State. So with that, our next story here, Kyrie Irving exercises his $36 million player option to return to the Nets. And then a follow-up to that, less than 24 hours after that, Kevin Durant requests a trade from the Nets directly from owner Joe Tsai. So clearly Kevin Durant was kind of over it. I'm assuming this means that had Kyrie Irving decided, well, and it's not even a given that Kyrie Irving has decided to stay with the Nets because he still might get signed and traded. So I'm not sure if Kevin Durant filed this trade request in response to Kyrie like exercising his player option, or if he was going to do it all along. You know what I mean? But at this point, we're just waiting to see where he ends up.
I mean, I just think that honestly, like, I didn't think Kevin Durant knew what he was getting into with Kyrie. And then when he saw all the extra stuff that happened with Kyrie, I think it kind of pushed him away. And like, I think Kevin Durant has the skills of a superstar, but doesn't have the personality of a superstar slash leader. You know, like I think a lot of superstars on their teams are looked to as like the leaders because they're kind of like the franchise guy, the face of the franchise. And I think KD kind of shies away from that. And I think he kind of low key thought he was going to be able to go to Brooklyn, which is, I don't know. I feel like Brooklyn is big, but also not big, as far as like their um, their presence in the NBA. I feel like
Right.
he thought he was going to be able to go to Brooklyn and kind of be able to focus on ball and championships. And Kyrie went up there and did the Kyrie thing and made it a little bit too much away from ball for him. Couldn't really mend the relationship he had with the team. And so, yeah, I think that it's not necessarily directly tied to Kyrie, but I think that all of Kyrie's problems from last year played a big decision in this. And I don't think that he feels like he can win with them. And I think that I don't think that Kevin Durant is really interested or like cares about the narrative on how he wins championships. I think he just wants to play good and win championships. I think that maybe we should stop looking at KD as like anything else besides like a ultra talented role player. Like, does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. I mean, I totally get it. Like for me, I'm just like of all the people that you could have chosen to team up with, because it's not like the Nets traded for Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. Bless you.
I
Kevin
think
Durant wasn't. Kevin Durant was there first, right? And then Kyrie Irving came, and then James Harden came. So like Kevin Durant had to have had at least a semi approval before they traded for those particular players. And so I'm like, of all the players that you could have chosen to team up with, you chose like the two most like drama spurring players in the entire league, other than like Patrick Beverly. But when it comes to like superstars, those are the two most drama spurring superstars in the league. So I'm like,
yeah, besides like James Harden, and they were on the team with James Harden.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's like, I interesting choice for that, but I do understand the angle there. And I mean, Brooklyn being kind of one of those, I don't want to say bottom feeder teams, but they struggled at times, especially like because they were recovering from that big trade, years back. Well, almost the same thing that they're now having to recover from that they just traded for three superstars and it did not work out for, in that case, age, and in this case, drama. So we'll have to see whether they end up keeping Kyrie or if Kyrie does a sign and trade and moves on. Um, we'll just have to see how all that plays out because, yeah, I mean, they may end up with just nothing left. And it's kind of sad that they were starting to build like a decent core before the whole Kevin Durant and Kyrie and then James Harden thing. Like they were actually putting together a little something with Jared Allen, Nick Claxton, and all those players, and then
Patty
now they've
Mills.
been traded away. Patty Mills now they've been. I think Patty Mills is like one of the only ones left, uh, you know. But most of that core got traded away, and getting like Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond and all these guys. So yeah, we'll have to see that how that works out for the Nets. But so that's going to do us for all of our NBA news today. Told you guys there's a ton going on in the NBA. We did not even cover even close to everything. There is a ton to talk about. But we kind of tried to choose the biggest stuff and just kind of run through that, or at least the biggest stuff and then stuff pertaining to our teams. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to our team breakdowns. And we're going to start with the Philadelphia Eagles. And Enrique, I will hand it off to you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. So, yeah, I luckily get to break down this Philadelphia Eagles team, and I'm so excited to do it. Starting out with their GM, Howie Roseman. He's been hidden. He has been hidden of lately as far as draft picks go. He's been able to really get the Eagles um, to go from where the Eagles were, they just won the Super Bowl and then they kind of took a step back, right? Hire Nick Sirianni, do the whole thing. Howie Roseman has just been a guiding influence through all those things, and he's been a pretty decent GM, so can't complain whatsoever. Nick Sirianni, it was a very puzzling head coaching decision for me when he first got hired, but it honestly has everything to do with how weird he acts in his press conferences and less the football side of things, because he has a pretty respectable, football resume. But ultimately, yeah, he's got the Eagles looking really, really hot right now. And especially coming into this season, they were able to add tons of guys through the draft. One of them, I mean, their first round pick, Jordan Davis, they picked at 13. The huge defensive tackle out of Georgia, one of my favorite draft picks in the whole draft altogether, just because of how much I love that guy. He's just a huge, athletic, dynamic force, and I think he's going to go on to be one of the best nose tackles. One of the best young nose tackles in the game. He's just a huge dominant force right there in the middle. And it was one of the big things that I felt like the Eagles were lacking was just that of like an infusion of youth on that offense or on that defensive line. And especially they were able to bring Fletcher Cox back this year, who has been a long-time Eagle, a long-time fan favorite, and just a very vicious man himself in the middle. So being able to pair him up with a young Jordan Davis, I think is going to, reap benefits for the Eagles. But anyways, moving on to the rest of their draft picks. In round 2, pick number 51, Cam Jurgens, a center out of Nebraska. Gotta love that they're able to shore up that offensive line, try to give Jalen Hurts some protection as much as they can. And to get a very solid center in the second round, you just gotta love the picks like that, because it just goes to show that the Eagles are paying attention to stuff of need, and they're able to take the best player available that also fits areas of need as well, especially with Jason Kelsey getting ready to eventually retire. So you're able to bring Jurgens in to kind of, apprentice underneath one of the best centers ever. Not a bad idea. Then in the third round at pick 83, they were able to steal Nakobe Dean, who dropped. Nakobe Dean was one of those linebackers that was looked as a first round pick in a lot of people's eyes, including my own. I think me and Ryan had him mocked going in the first round, towards the end of the first round for sure. But I think we had him mocked going in the first round. A lot of people had him going, honestly, like from like 10 down. Some people had him going in the top 10. Wasn't personally for me. But the Eagles were able to get him in the third round after dropping. And he was obviously a teammate of Jordan Davis, which is even more of a plus for the Eagles, because they're getting two guys coming off a championship winning defense who already know each other, know how to play with each other, know the strengths, and can come in and be impactful players for your defense right away. As long as Nakobe Dean, his health stays up with him. That's why he dropped, was primarily due to his health. So as long as Nakobe Dean stays healthy, I think we should be okay. And then sixth round, pick 181, Kyron Johnson, linebacker out of Kansas. And another sixth round pick, pick 181. It's going to be or 198. I'm sorry, Grant Calcaterra, a tight end at SMU. And the Eagles did have some more draft picks, but they traded those draft picks, number 18 and the 101st pick, which obviously is a first round and a third round pick, for A.J. Brown from the Titans. That's the big move from the Eagles draft weekend, was trading the first and the third for A.J. Brown and giving A.J. Brown a new contract in addition to trading for him. So You know, it's kind of like a very similar situation with the Dolphins and Tyreek Hill. I think, if I'm being honest with you, the Eagles got a way better trade value over the Dolphins. I just think AJ Brown is the type of receiver that Jalen needs to play with. I think AJ Brown has been a force in the league. Not saying that Tyreek Hill hasn't, but what the Dolphins gave up for Tyreek Hill, I feel like is just a lot. A lot, a lot, a lot. I mean, the Dolphins literally only put 4 guys this year, 3 or 4 guys this year, where the Eagles were still able to draft Jordan Davis, arguably the best nose tackle in this year's class. They were still able to take, one of the top offensive linemen in the second round. They were still able to take, one of the top linebackers who obviously dropped in the third round and get impact guys in the sixth round. While still trading for AJ Brown, who's been a Pro Bowl wide receiver and is going to be their new number 1 wide receiver, you just cannot overstate how impactful that is. And with a combination of not only their draft class, who I think is going to come in right away and give them quality snaps and quality looks, especially Jordan Davis and Kobe Dean, you're also getting AJ Brown, who you're also going to pair with Devontae Smith, your first round and top 10 pick. I think they took him 6th overall. So yeah, you're mixing AJ Brown with Devontae Smith, who's going to help develop Devontae, help give him more open looks. I cannot tell you how much of a win I thought this was for the Eagles. And with it being biased because I thought the Jets had the best draft weekend, I would put, right up there with the Ravens and the Saints. I would say that, the Eagles had a very, very successful draft weekend. And I think a big part of that was trading for AJ Brown successfully. And I mean, you weakened the Titans significantly by doing that. Not that the Eagles and Titans are necessarily rivals in any way, but if you're going to be possibly seeing them in the Super Bowl or possibly, just able to take a power chip away from another good team is just always a thing. So, but after going off about their draft for a good minute, I'll get into our roster now. So sitting at the top of the quarterback depth chart is going to be Jalen Hurts, obviously, who's coming to a very pivotal season. We really need to see Jalen Hurts step up this year, and I think he will personally. Then second string, we got Gardner Minshew, who was fighting for snaps and has been trying to start. I don't think that he's going to be able to here in Philly, but a good quality backup behind Jalen Hurts who can do similar things to him in case Jalen wasn't able to play in a game. Then we have Carson Strong rounding out that room. Getting to their running backs, we got Miles Sanders coming off of relatively inconsistent injury-riddled season, and he's had a few of those so far, so he's looking to come back healthy. Boston Scott, who's able to fill in admirably for him, and then Kenneth Gainwell to round that out. Wide receiver-wise, we got Devontae Smith, we got AJ Brown, who just came over from the Titans, like we just said. Quez Watkins, Zach Pascal, Greg Ward, Jalen Rieger, and then Devin Allen. Devon Allen, he's probably more so going to be looking to make an impact special teams, kick returner, punt returner, because Olympic gold or Olympic medalist for track or something along those lines. So just super, super quick guy. Wouldn't look to him too much as a wide receiver threat besides, just some crazy go routes and stuff like that. Then getting into the tight end room there, we got Dallas Goedert, Grant Salcaterra, the rookie tight end, JJ Arcega-Whiteside, who is a wide receiver convert, so used to play wide receiver, converting over to tight end, hasn't done too bad. And then Jack Stoll, just to back those guys up, give them, a different look. Then left tackle, we got Jordan Mailata, Andre Dillard, and LaRaven Clark, who, by the way, is their swing tackle. So he's going to play right tackle and left tackle, back up Lane Johnson down there. over on the right side as well. And then getting into our left guards, we got Landon Dickerson and Jack Driscoll, who plays guard and tackle as well. That's one thing that the Eagles have is a um, nice stable of versatile guys on their offensive line who can play a lot of these positions. So and that's the nice thing about having versatile guys like that can play on both sides is you just don't have to carry as many guys on your roster as far as offensive linemen. And then center, we've got to go with the all-pro Jason Kelsey. And then backing him up is going to be the rookie Cam Jurgens. Right guard, we got Isaac Sumalo. And then with rounding out the right tackles is Lane Johnson. And then, yeah, like I said, just having those guys be able to play multiple roles on the offensive line is huge. Getting to the defensive side of things, on the defensive line, we got Brandon Graham, who was hurt last year, is coming back. Fletcher Cox, who was just re-signed. Javon Hargreaves, Josh Sweat, defensive end. Derek Barnett, defensive end. Jordan Davis, defensive tackle. Milton Williams, defensive tackle. Noah Ellis, defensive tackle. And Teron Jackson, defensive tackle. Or defensive end, sorry. So lots of pass rushers on that defensive line. And then even more so once you start looking into what Jordan Davis can do, just some big men on that defensive line as well. Linebacker, you got Hassan Reddick, newly signed free agent. And although he's listed as a linebacker, he's going to line up on a lot of different spots for the Eagles on that defense just because they're going to really look to maximize his pass rush capabilities. And then you got Kaiser White coming over from the Chargers, who I believe you were saying is a big addition for the Eagles coming over from the Chargers because one of your buddies was saying that Kaiser White was playing really good for them. So I look for Kaiser White to be an impact player for them as well. And then you got T.J. Edwards, Sean Bradley, third round pick Nakobe Dean, Davison Taylor, I should say, and then Kyron Johnson wrapping up the linebackers there. So just real nice variety type linebackers. Got guys that can tackle, got guys that can play the pass rush a little bit like Hassan Reddick. And I honestly wasn't very high on their linebacker room until I got more into it and kind of saw who they had. And yeah, I'm relatively comfortable with their linebackers right now. Then their corners are going to be Darius Slade Jr., James Bradbury coming over from the Giants, Zach McPherson, Avonte Maddox, Tay Gowan, and Andre Chattery. Andre Chattery is probably going to play a lot of special teams, filling for different roles on the team. Safeties, we got Marcus Epps, Anthony Harris, and Kavon Wallace. Long snapper, we got Rick Lovato. Kicker, we got Jake Elliott. And then our punter is going to be Arian Slopes. And that kind of wraps it up for the roster. I mean, I think the Eagles have tons of talent on this roster. I think the addition of James Bradbury and Slade Jr. is going to be a very deadly one back there in the secondary. And I really do think that this defense can make some noise. So I'm really excited to see what happens there. So that's pretty much that's the projected 50-man 3 roster that I got for the Eagles going forward. So some questions about this roster that I have. The first one that I ask myself is how good is Jalen Hurts? And I'm a huge believer in Jalen Hurts. I think he's going to take a step forward, but I think a lot of this Eagles team rides on him, obviously being quarterback number 1. So I think if he's able to take a step forward and continue to develop on the upward trending arrow, then I think the Eagles are going to be just fine. And I think that they're going to, get back into the playoffs again this year. But what we need to see is just because he was able to get them into the playoffs, we need to be able to see him be competitive in the playoffs. Obviously, he had to play Tom Brady down in Tampa, and it was a very ugly game for the Eagles. But that's kind of the stuff that we need to see Jalen correct. And not saying that everything was on Jalen. There was a lot of dropped balls, which hopefully having AJ Brown come into the game or coming into the season, hopefully that's going to help with that. Having another offensive weapon besides a rookie Devontae Smith, who's now going to his second year, um, and besides Dallas Goedert, is going to be real nice. Hopefully, we get Miles Sanders back nice and healthy as well. But I think a lot of this comes down to Jalen Hurts and if he takes a step forward or a step back in his development. Another question that I have is how fast can the offense find, decent chemistry? Obviously, with a new wide receiver one and Devontae Smith coming into his second year, you have a lot of new moving pieces in the offense. And sometimes it takes a little bit for an offense to kind of gel. And I think depending on how long, and we'll get into their schedule here shortly, but depending on how long that offense takes to gel, going into the season, if they're able to play really well into the preseason and come out that first game against Detroit hot, and then I think we'll be all right going into the rest of the year. But if it takes a few weeks for them to start gelling, their schedule eventually gets harder. It has a nice up and down peak in it, but it starts off relatively easy, and then it gets into some harder games. And so if it takes a long time for your offense to gel, are you getting into these harder games, that are going to be harder to win anyways, and you've already lost some of the easier games that you could have won? That's one thing that I worry about a little bit with this Eagles offense, with everything that's going into it now. But with that being said, if the Eagles are able to gel and get things going, I think they arguably have one of the best offenses in the NFC East. And I think that a lot of the Cowboys offense goes through CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. Especially now with Amari Cooper being gone. I do know that they have Dalton Schultz and Ezekiel Elliott, but Ezekiel Elliott has struggled the last few years, to say the least. I do think that he has an opportunity to come back this year, but we could say the same things about Miles Sanders with the Eagles. And arguably, I think Miles Sanders is a bit younger and has a bit more explosion, at least in his steps right now, than Ezekiel Elliott does. Even though I love Zeke, and I think he still can be a very decent option at running back for the Cowboys when he's healthy. And then, obviously on the Giants you got, and we'll get into the Giants obviously today, but you got Saquon Barkley, Kenny Golladay, and really that's it. You got some other guys that can make some plays for the Giants, but with their quarterback play this year and going forward, I'm not sure that they're going to be able to fully utilize all those weapons that they can potentially have on that Giants offense. So, if Jalen's able to take a step forward, this offense is able to mesh, guys come back healthy and stay healthy. You have AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders. I think that's Jalen Hurts is a very mobile dual threat quarterback himself. Devontae and him already got that Alabama connection. I think the Eagles offense could be very, very scary if they're able to, kind of get all these things together. And then, another thing that this kind of reminds me of, especially whenever the Eagles get good like this, is it's very Vince Young Dream Team-esque. And the reason I say that is because, way back when the Eagles got good, they had Vince Young as their backup quarterback, collected Najee Asamoah and a whole bunch of other guys, with James Bradbury coming along and, already having Darius Slay the last couple of years, Jalen Hurts now, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert. You have a lot of well-known players on this team now. Jordan Davis, coming from the championship defense of Georgia, Nakobe Dean, as well. There's a lot of guys on this team, that are kind of names, and even more so, the expectations of this team are going to be high. I see the Eagles competing for the NFC East crown, if not winning it. I think the only competition they have is going to be the Cowboys. I think the Commanders could be in the run for it, depending on how good Carson Wentz is, and how healthy Chase Young comes back from his injury. But I really do see the Eagles kind of, leading the pack here with the Cowboys in regards to who's going to win the division, and when those expectations come down on the Eagles, is the team going to be able to handle it? And is the team going to be able to rise to the occasion and fulfill those pressures? And yeah, I just think on another note, in addition to that, is that the defense could be really, really scary, along with the offense, if they're able to mesh as well. Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, Hassan Reddick. You got two lockdown corners, and Darius Slay. You can ask Bronco fans. Darius Slay is a very good corner. He picked off Teddy Bridgewater, ran that shit back. So Darius Slay is a very good corner, and he's held down the Eagles secondary pretty much all by his lonesome. So having Hassan Reddick come in there to be able to, add a pass rush, pass rush specialist. We talked about Hassan Reddick a lot when we broke down the Panthers, because Hassan Reddick was their pass rush along with Brian Burns last year. So with him coming to the Eagles now, and with the guys that the Eagles already have, especially Brandon Graham coming back from an ACL or an Achilles injury last year. You got Jordan Davis on the defensive line, who's going to eat space and who's an athletic freak himself, who can kind of get after the quarterback. And then you got Fletcher Cox, who's coming back, so James Bradbury, who's a very good corner for the Giants, and someone that the Giants didn't necessarily want to give up, but because of some cap issues, they had to. So I think that the Eagles defense can be very, very good right off the bat. And I honestly think that the Eagles defense is going to be the unit that's leaned on a little bit, with the offense still kind of coming into its own and Jalen Hurts still kind of figuring out some of his stuff. I think that the Eagles defense is in a better opportunity to start off good right away, just because they're not necessarily asking they're not reliant so much on such a big question mark like Jalen Hurts. And I know it sounds like I'm very unsure of Jalen Hurts. I'm not as much, but I do think that this is going to be the year where this year and next year we're going to find out if he's good or not. And I think this is a very big year for him, and I just don't want that to be, I don't want that to be taken as an understatement, because I think it's almost like it is like the piece for the Eagles is how good he is, because although this roster is very good and has a lot of depth in it as well, your football team lives and dies off of quarterback number one, and in this instance, quarterback number one literally wears number one. So Jalen Hurts is going to be looked to do a lot of different things. So with that being said, Ryan, what do you think about the Eagles roster?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, great job breaking down that roster. And I mean, it's one that throughout this offseason we've talked about multiple times, as they've added players here and there in free agency and the draft. And they're looking really, really nice, both offensively and defensively. You talk about the A.J. Brown trade, you know what I mean? You talk about all the players they added defensively, both in the draft and then in free agency with James Bradbury and helping out Darius Slay, like you said, was kind of holding down that secondary on his own, and now he's got some more help, and that defense as a whole is looking to be really, really nice. So I could not agree more with everything you said there. Yeah, it really does come down to Jalen Hurts. I think we share pretty much the same opinion on Jalen Hurts. Is we really like him, and like I'm hoping that he can be the long term answer, but he's got to prove it. And like I said, this year, maybe the next year is going to be when we really find out what his ceiling is going to be. But I mean, I think there's some people that will act like he's been like bad, and I will remind people, because it's like it's crazy to just you gotta like humble yourself sometime with the takes you see on like Twitter and things like that. Is you'll see people slander Jalen Hurts or like Tua, and the Eagles and the Dolphins were both over 500 last year. with Tua and Jalen, and then you have people saying they like just can't even win games at all. Meanwhile, you look at like the Denver Broncos over the last few years, and we haven't hit 500 since like 2017 with a multitude of quarterbacks. So like, people will tell you Jalen Hurts sucks or Tua sucks, but sometimes you gotta like actually look at the fact that the Eagles went 9-8 last year with Jalen Hurts and a significantly less talented roster than what they're coming into this year with, and with a new like scary weapon in AJ Brown to add to it. Like these Eagles are going to look really interesting. So I couldn't agree with more with what you broke down there. Uh, yeah, this is going to be a super fun team for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that being said, I guess we can get into their schedule a little bit. So week 1, starting out right away, you're playing Detroit at home, in Detroit. And although Detroit has added some things, I still think that they are still lacking as far as a football team. So I do think that the Eagles will be able to get a win there at Detroit. Then we're going back to Philadelphia to play Minnesota. I think that's probably going to be another dub. And then this is at week 3. This is at Washington. This game could go either way. And this is one of those games where I'm saying that we're going to see how good that offense is meshing at this point. Because division rival at home, or on the road, I guess I should say, for the Eagles. If you're able to knock off Washington here, which, it shouldn't be a close game because the Eagles have far more talent than the Commanders do, but I think it will be a closer game because, Carson Wentz could randomly go off. They got Scary Terry. They have a very good defense. But I still think that the Eagles will be able to pull that win off. So I got them at 3-0 right now, going into week 4 with Jacksonville coming into Philly. Jacksonville obviously sucks. So that's going to be a dub for the Eagles. Now week 5 is where we start getting interesting because week 5 they go into Arizona. I think Arizona at home is going to be tough to beat, even without DeAndre Hopkins. I think with the addition of Hollywood Brown, I think that's going to make that a little less. Don't get me wrong. DeAndre Hopkins is, one of the best wide receivers in the league, and I think that his impact is going to be profound on that offense. But I think with the addition of Hollywood Brown and some of the stuff that the Cardinals have added through the draft and the offseason, I think that they can still get a win over the Eagles. Now week 6, Dallas at home. This is going to be one of those toss-up games. I think that the Eagles could win. And I think that they'll probably end up splitting their series with Dallas. I think that the Eagles get the win at home. And then going into week 7, that's their bye. So, they're going to be able to take a nice, decent rest, a good ways through the season. Then coming back, you got Pittsburgh at home, or Pittsburgh and Philly. I think that's going to be a win for them, depending on how Kenny Pickett's playing. Then you're going into Houston. Houston obviously still sucks, so another win. Then you get Washington again. I think another win, especially with them coming into Philly. Then you're week 11, you got the Colts. I think that's going to be a loss. That's in Indy. Then week 12 against Green Bay. I think that's another loss. Week 13, you're playing against Tennessee. Even at home, I still think that's a loss. Week 14, you have the Giants. I think in New York, you can still get it done. I got them winning. Week 15 at Chicago, I have them winning as well. Week 16 in Dallas, I have them losing, and that's where I have those seasons splitting with the Cowboys, with them losing in Dallas and then winning at home. Week 17, you have New Orleans, which I also see as a loss. I think this is going to be a Saints team that's, making a playoff push, and I think that, that's playoff football time. So I think it's going to be really close, but I do think that the Saints win. And then week 18, the Giants, depending. We're not sure if that game's going to be at home or away yet, but I still think that they can get a win over the Giants. Just a couple things about the schedule. So with that being said, I have them going 11-6, 12-5, depending on how things go. I think the Arizona game's huge. The Tennessee game's huge, just because those are games that are winnable. You can beat those teams. It just, can you get over the hump? Can you do enough to beat those teams? I think the Eagles on paper versus Arizona and Tennessee, you can beat those teams. And if you're able to beat those teams, that makes you 13-4. You know what I mean? So, that's a very strong schedule for the Eagles. And I also do think that there's a chance that you can beat the Cowboys twice. I do think the Cowboys have talent. I think they're lacking a little bit on the defensive side, more so than the Eagles are. I know that, they have Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs. I think Trayvon Diggs gets burnt a lot and gives up a lot of plays, although he makes interceptions. I think Trayvon Diggs gives up a lot of plays. Micah Parsons is a huge part of the defense, DeMarcus Lawrence, et cetera, et cetera. I think that the Eagles can match those guys now. I think the Eagles with Darius Slay and James Bradbury can match their secondary. Anthony Harris, covering the top there as their safety. And then with Nakobe Dean, Hassan Reddick, Jordan Davis, all those guys, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, all those guys on the defensive line, I think can match the Cowboys pass rush and the Cowboys run defense as well. So you can possibly take both those Dallas games. And again, that makes your schedule even. Now we're talking about maybe 15-3. Like the Eagles have a really nice schedule. They play a few really good teams, and their division's weak. And I think the Cowboys are very 50-50 on how they're going to play the Eagles, especially with how good the Eagles have had as an offseason. So my accurate schedule prediction for the Eagles is going to be 11-6. Possibly 12-5, leaning on the 11-6 though. Yeah, Ryan, what do you think about the Eagles schedule?
I think that's really reasonable. 11-6, 12-5, and like you talked about with that roster, it's a really exciting team that made a lot of additions, and if Jalen Hurts can you know take a leap and keep playing well and get even better, uh, they've got an opportunity in front of them to rack up a lot of wins. So we'll just have to see what happens, but I would tend to agree with about that. 11 or 12 wins, and yeah, I'm just excited to see them come game day. So with that, I suppose we'll move right on to the New York Giants. Their general manager, Joe Schoen, and then head coach Brian Dable, both new arrivals this year, fired the previous staff there. So a lot of new changes for the New York Giants come this year. Obviously, Brian Dable comes over from the Buffalo Bills, their offensive coordinator. Uh, so exciting stuff going on. We'll have to see if they can make a positive change for this Giants organization that, since Eli Manning retired, has kind of struggled to, you know, stay in the spotlight, I guess. So their draft class, we can start with at pick number 5 in the first round, Kayvon Thibodeau, a defensive end out of Oregon. Obviously, very talented player. Excited to see what he can do. And then at number 7, just 2 picks later, Evan Neal, offensive tackle out of Alabama, arguably the best offensive tackle in the entire draft. Number 2, or round 2, number 43, rather, Wandale Robinson, wide receiver out of Kentucky. Uh, Round 3, number 67, Joshua Ezeudu, offensive guard out of North Carolina. Round number 3, 81, Cordell Flott. And then round 4, 112, Daniel Bellinger, tight end out of San Diego. Round 4, pick 114, Dane Belton, a safety out of Iowa. Round 5, pick 146, Micah McFadden, inside linebacker out of Indiana. Round 5, 147, DJ Davidson, defensive tackle out of Arizona. Round 5, 173, Marcus McKethan, guard out of North Carolina. And then finally, round 6, 182, Darian Beavers, inside linebacker out of Cincinnati. A lot of draft picks. Like, I think that might be, out of all the teams that we've covered, the most draft picks. They drafted a lot of players. But quite a few players that could potentially make an impact, and a lot of players in spots that they're missing uh, bodies that they needed. And so going into that, key departures of this offseason. So James Bradbury, at cornerback, played 99% of your snaps. He's gone. Obviously, we just talked about him. And then Logan Ryan, a safety, played 85% of your snaps. Kyle Rudolph, tight end, played 45%. Nate Solder, your left tackle, played 84%. Austin Johnson, inside defensive lineman, played 56%. Billy Price, center, played 89% of snaps. Devontae Booker, former Bronco running back, played 47%. Evan Ingram, who was actually their leading overall receiver, like leading in receiving yards, but it was a tight end, played 65% of the snaps for the Giants last year. And then Jabril Peppers, a safety, 19%. Will Hernandez, a guard, at 95%. Lorenzo Carter, an edge, at 52%. And then finally, Matt Skura, a center, at 69%. And I mean, kind of like the draft picks, there's just a ton of players here. Clearly, the new GM, the new head coach, they kind of wanted to, clear house a little bit and add some of their own guys in there. Uh, Obviously, some of those players, even though they played a lot of snaps, were players that you were kind of expecting to be on their way out, like Nate Solder, uh, and some of the like Will Hernandez, Billy Price. So, you know, not some of them were not surprising, and then some of them, like you said, with James Bradbury, was just a situation where, with their cap, they're just kind of trying to reset and rebuild right now, with this new staff in place. So ended up getting rid of him, but added some nice players in the draft, and then now we can go over their roster. So starting at quarterback, Daniel Jones, obviously a third-year quarterback looking to still make a name for himself. This will probably be his last year to figure it out. And then behind him, Tyrod Taylor comes over from Houston, longtime veteran. That'll be a good presence to be in Daniel Jones's ear for sure. David Webb behind him. And then the run back room, Saquon Barkley, obviously one of the best in the league. Matt Breida comes over from Buffalo, probably a guy that Dable likes, I assume. Gary Brightwell, and then Jashawn Corbin is an undrafted free agent. At wide receiver, you have Kenny Galladay, and then Sterling Shepard, Kadarius Toney for now. Although I believe he's like made it known that he doesn't want to be on the Giants anymore. I don't know if that's actually going to come to fruition or if he's just like talking and nothing's going to come out of it. But Kadarius Toney is on this team for now. And then behind him, Wan'Dale Robinson, your draft pick, the second round, number 43. Uh, CJ Board as well, Richie James, and then Darius Slayton. And yeah, I mean, so they've got a decent wide receiver room, and this is arguably like the deepest room in the entire roster. But at the same time, they're not really like they don't have like a superstar guy at the moment. I think when you look at Kadarius Toney and even Sterling Shepard, those are two guys that you think maybe can develop into something like that, but they aren't there right now. And Kenny Galladay is a solid receiver, but not like a superstar. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, they've got some decent weapons, but nothing like just pops out at you. And then at tight end, Daniel Bellinger, your fourth round draft pick, number 112, is going to be the likely starter for you. After you talk about the key departures, Evan Ingram and Kyle Rudolph, both of your top two tight ends are gone. So now, that was a very important pick to make in that draft because otherwise you're looking at Ricky Seals-Jones as your number one, who's currently your number two. And then they also bring in Jordan Akins from Houston. So looking at their offensive line here, left tackle, you have Andrew Thomas. Behind him, Joshua Azulu, the third round pick, number 67. Devery Hamilton, and then Roy Mbeteka. Sorry, butchered that. He's an undrafted free agent. And then left guard, Shane Lemieux. Jameel Douglas comes over from Washington. And then Ben Bredesen comes over as well. Center, you have John Feliciano. Max Garcia comes over from Arizona. And then Nick Gates. And right guard, you have Mark Glowinski comes over from Indianapolis rather. Marcus McKethan is your fifth round draft pick, number 173. And then Josh Rivas, an undrafted free agent. And then finally, right tackle, you have the first round rookie Evan Neal, your likely starter there. Matt Gono comes over from Atlanta, Corey Cunningham, and then Matt Part. And this offensive line, something that the Giants have struggled with and has not only made Daniel Jones's life hard, but Saquon's too, and has struggled with his production and contributed to his injury history with the struggle of trying to get a decent line there. But the bright side for this Giants team is that with this new staff and clearing out some of those names you talk about, Billy Price, talk about Nate Solder, talk about Will Hernandez, some of those guys that were kind of sticking around on this Giants roster that were just not doing well enough. And even though they were veteran names and established names, there needed to be change. And so at least there's been change and they've brought in some bodies. I don't know if this line is going to be good this year. You have pieces. I'm excited to see what Evan Neal can do, but they're at least adding bodies and they're trying to see what works. You know what I mean? And it's change. So it's a positive in that sense for them for sure. And this offense overall, we've got talent. It's like this team as a whole. It's just in the transitionary stage. So with that, we will move on to the defense. We go down the defense, starting with the safeties. Free safety of Xavier McKinney, Jaron Williams, and then Yusuf Corker. At strong safety, Julian Love, Dane Belton, your fourth round draft pick at number 114. And then Henry Black comes over from Green Bay. At cornerback, you have Aaron Robinson, Adoree Jackson, Michael Jacquet, and then Redarius Williams. And then inside linebacker, Blake Martinez, Micah McFadden, Carter Coughlin, and Darian Beavers. At the edge spot there, Kayvon Thibodeau, Aziz Olujari, Jihad Ward comes over from Jacksonville, Ellerson Smith, and then Quincy Roach. And at your defensive lineman spot, you have Dexter Lawrence rather, and then Leonard Williams, the two big boys leading it off there. David Moa, Jalen Holmes, and then Jabari Ellis is an undrafted free agent. And then nose tackle, you have Justin Ellis comes in from Baltimore, and DJ Davidson, your fifth round pick at number 147, and then Christopher Hinton. And finally, as well, your kicker and punter, Graham Gano and Jamie Gillen. And yeah, so this defense, they've lost a lot of bodies. Again, you go back to those key departures. You talk about James Bradbury played 99% of the snaps. Logan Ryan, 85%. Austin Johnson, 56%. Jabril Peppers, 19. Lorenzo Carter, 52%. So they lost a lot of impact players. And like I said, with the offense, it's in a transitionary stage. And they're adding players, seeing what works. I'm excited to see about some of these rookies when it comes to DJ Davidson. Right now your starter in the middle there is Justin Ellis, who came over from Baltimore and is not necessarily proven as a player. And so if DJ Davidson comes on strong in camp, you could see him starting immediately, potentially, just depending on what happens in camp. And then you talk about in the safety spot, Dane Belton. He's an interesting player as well. He played a lot of different roles in college, and so he could be somebody that, although doesn't project to start at the strong safety spot, maybe he can make an impact somewhere on the secondary, maybe even a cornerback spot because they're a little bit, weak there. So maybe he can make an impact there. But yeah, I mean, you look at that cornerback room: Aaron Robinson, Adoree Jackson, Michael Jacquet, Redarius Williams. Just not a lot there. Adoree Jackson is solid. Aaron Robinson is a guy. And yeah, I mean, certainly if Dane Belton can help out, that strengthens that room a little bit. And they're just looking to kind of, like I said, recover and rebuild at this point. That secondary used to be a strength of the Giants in these last few years, but it's really been kind of depleted at this point. And so they're going to have to rebuild it. But a couple storylines here on this roster. So first one, so much youth across this roster. How quick can they grow up? I talked a lot about the new staff there and all the additions and just trying to rebuild this thing. And uh, their amount of success is going to depend on how quickly a lot of those players in key positions can, play well. Especially when you talk about like that secondary with a lot of these young corners, a lot of these young safeties, things like that, and you're relying on those guys. That's going to be a struggle for you if those guys are getting picked on in a very pass heavy, wide receiver and quarterback rich NFL right now. So it's one of those things that's really going to determine, along with uh, Daniel Jones, which is my second story here, it's going to determine their success, really. So our second story, uh, Daniel Jones, if he plays much better, a lot of those easier games, or I'm sorry, wrong spot here. Daniel Jones is probably his last year as the starter to prove himself. Is he the quarterback of the future for the Giants, or is he not? We talked a little bit about this earlier with Daniel Jones, and it's like he has not been like awful for them, and he showed flashes, and he has athletic ability, but he hasn't had the consistency with it and has made a lot of repeated dumb mistakes and also really struggles with the turnover battle. He's very fumble prone and has not, to this point in his career, improved that a whole lot. But this is really going to probably be his last year to make that change. And if he doesn't, I would expect the Giants to pursue other options. I think it was kind of one of those situations where Dable is just like, I'm going to let him because he's doing his thing. I'm going to let him finish out this last year, let him have the full off season, do his thing, and then if it doesn't work out, then Dable will bring in whoever he needs to bring in. But we'll see if he can pull it off and maybe be the Giants' long term starter. And then my third story here, new GM and new head coach gutted a lot of the existing roster and added a lot of the new young talent. Will their new direction be better? And I mean, it's kind of talked a lot about that throughout the entire thing, but it's one thing to say, okay, they're doing this and there is change. Will the change be good? I think they haven't liked where they've been at with the last few head coaches, and so I think Brian Dable is a very respected coach, and Joe Schoen obviously respected as well, and we'll just have to see with time whether they're going to end up being a successful duo there over with the Giants. But yeah, at least they're doing something so far. So Enrique, what are your thoughts on this roster?
I agree with a lot of your points on the roster. I do think the only difference is I think that this is for sure Daniel Jones' last chance to prove if he can be a starter or not in the league. I do not think that he's going to prove enough. And I do think that, unfortunately, the Giants are very limited by him. I do like that they had so many draft picks. I do like that they invested so heavily into the roster. I love their first round. I feel like their first round really set them up for to have two blue chip franchise players on both sides of the offensive and defensive line. With Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal. Evan Neal was probably my favorite tackle in the whole draft coming out of Alabama. So I have a lot of belief in him, and I think KT is made for New York. I think that he has a personality for New York. I think he's exciting. I think he's going to add a lot of flash and pass rush to this Giants defensive line. That's not half. I mean, it's not half good. It's not half bad either. I think Leonard Williams is nice. I think that you hit on perfectly as far as their secondary goes. I think the secondary it looks rough for sure. At least on paper, their secondary looks really, really rough right now. Xavier McKinney's, a bright spot in that on that secondary for me, just because I like him a lot. Julian Love as well. I don't mind Blake Martinez as much as far as linebackers go, but yeah, I mean, I just hope that the Giants they have their pieces there, and I think honestly, if they give the roster to Tyrod Taylor, they'd be in much better hands. But I guess we'll just have to see how the season goes. But otherwise, yeah, I just think he did a great job breaking them down. And honestly, I thought the Giants roster was a lot worse condition than they are, and I think that they, are a few pieces away from not necessarily being good, but being better than 4-18 or 4-14 or whatever they were last year. So 4-13, sorry. So yeah, I I like the inside look on the Giants, even though I hate them. And yeah, I guess we'll just see what Daniel Jones and the new GM and the new head coach can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's one of those things where like uh, I'm sure we'll probably end up seeing Tyrod throughout the season, just because I'm kind of with you. Like I would love to see it for Daniel Jones' sake, but I don't think that he's going to be the long-term future of the Giants, and so I would not be surprised to see Tyrod Taylor take over the team at some point throughout the season here. But we will just have to see. All right, with that, we can move on to the Giants' schedule. So, as Enrique mentioned, their 2021 record was 4-13, and we could just jump right into it. So, week one, they're at Tennessee Titans. I have that as a loss. Week two, they're versus the Carolina Panthers. I have that as a win, but I do think that that game could honestly go either way. Just depending on how well the Panthers are playing, if Sam Darnold finds his footing and or Daniel Jones finds his footing, and vice versa. So we'll just have to see how that one plays out. Week three versus the Dallas Cowboys at home, I have that as a loss. Week four versus the Chicago Bears, I do have that as a win. Week five versus Green Bay Packers, I have that as a loss. Week six versus Baltimore Ravens at home, a loss. Week seven at Jacksonville Jaguars. I I have this as a loss, to be honest with you. I know the
Huh.
Jaguars are not that great, but I think that Trevor Lawrence with Doug Peterson as his new head coach is not going to be as held back as he was before, and I'm kind of optimistic about maybe what the Jaguars can become with new direction. So uh, I think this is one that could go either way, and that the Giants are going to have to play hard for and they could win it, but I have it as a loss. Week eight, they're at the Seattle Seahawks. I have that as a loss too. But that's one that I do think could go either way as well because the Seahawks don't know what they're doing with quarterback right now. If they happen to pick up Baker Mayfield, that's for sure a win though. But they don't have Baker Mayfield right now. So it's either Geno Smith or Drew Lock. So week nine is their bye week there, pretty much smacked out in the middle of the season. Week 10 versus the Houston Texans at home, I have that as a win. Week 11 versus the Detroit Lions, I have this as an L because I actually am high on the Detroit Lions too. I think they're kind of on the up and up. They're adding talent. Jared Goff is a quarterback that can win, and I don't know. I think that the Lions are going to be not competitive for like a playoff spot or anything, but better than they were last year. Week 12 at Dallas Cowboys on a Thursday game. I have that as a loss. Week 13 versus the Washington Commanders at home. I have that as a loss. Week 14 versus Philadelphia Eagles. I have that as a loss as well. And then week 15, or I'm sorry, week 16 at Minnesota Vikings is a loss as well. Week 17 versus the Indianapolis Colts is a loss. And to finish off the season, they're at the Philadelphia Eagles for another loss. So I'm sorry, Giants fans. I feel bad, but I only have this team at 3 wins, 3-15, one less than last year. I think, I mean, you look at that roster and they had more talent last year and won 4 games. And now uh, although I think they're moving in the right direction, I think this is a transition year and they just don't have the talent that they're really going to be competing with a whole lot of any teams in the league at all, to be honest with you. Just, and, maybe next year you add up even more in free agency, see if Daniel Jones is the answer. Maybe you're getting a new quarterback next year. We'll just have to see how it develops. But I do think that the Giants are moving in the right direction. So a couple thoughts on the schedule: rebuilding roster, but tough schedule to go along with it. It's you have a weak roster and you're rebuilding it, but it's not a cakewalk of a schedule. I mean, you have some easy games sprinkled in there. You're talking about like Chicago, Houston. Technically, you could say Detroit and Jacksonville are on that list. You know, there are some easier games sprinkled in there, but you've got a tough division and relatively, and you've got because the Commanders are getting better and Dallas is competing, and I mean Eagles are right there at the top, like you said. So I do think that the Giants are the worst in the division here, and so that's an uphill battle from the start. And then you're facing a lot of good teams as well. So, second thought, tough teams at home. You look at Indianapolis, Baltimore, Green Bay, and Dallas, all those teams at home. You probably even put Commanders in there. I don't know how good I expect the Commanders to be, but they are tougher than the Giants on paper. And they have a better defense, and Carson Wentz is, on paper, a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. So, I mean, tough games for the Giants there. And then number three, if Daniel Jones plays much better, a lot of those easier games that are losses become wins. Talk about the Lions, talk about the Commanders' home game, maybe the Jaguars, Seattle. I just right now viewing Daniel Jones the way I view Daniel Jones based on what he's shown on tape. I have a hard time picking him in almost any of those games, and it would have to be a very concerted, like good effort from the entire team to pull out a win against even some of those lower level competition. Um, and so I think that's unfortunately just where the Giants are at right now. What are your thoughts on the schedule, Enrique?
I think that their schedule is fucked. If I'm being honest with you, the Giants have a super tough schedule. I do agree with you that they have like some like the Bears game, the Panthers game, the Seahawks game, the Jaguars game. They have games that they could possibly win, but with all of those teams as well, I also see I think the Carolina Panthers. If I'm being honest with you, I I trust Sam Darnold more than I trust Daniel Jones.
Yeah,
I trust Sam Darnold more than I trust Daniel Jones. So
way better
I think that
defense too.
yeah, with Chicago Bears, like I think that Justin Fields I trust more. Even with losing Khalil Mack, I think the Bears I actually have like probably less talent than the Giants do. Still think that that Justin Fields could pull that shit off. Like
Yeah,
the Jaguars, I agree. I think they could lose against the Jaguars, especially if now they're back-to-back number one overall picks, especially if they get off to a hard start, especially Trevor Lawrence. And I can almost bet that Trevor Lawrence is going to come into this with like a fire underneath his ass this year, especially with what happened last year with Urban Meyer and not winning very many games. So
yeah, yeah. I would tend to agree
I
with
think,
this.
I think if the Giants are able to take advantage of some of the weaker games on their schedule, then I think that it's going to be great. But otherwise, I think they have a pretty rough schedule. Obviously, they're the weakest team in the division, so the division games themselves are going to be tough. And then, yeah, you have to play the Eagles and the Cowboys, which are playoff teams. You have to play the Packers, the Ravens, which you have no chance against those teams. Then you have to play the Colts. Like the Houston Texans kind of can go either way. Um, I don't. That's probably like the game that I would say is the most toss-up game there on the whole schedule is the Texans game, because any of all those other games I really do think like look kind of bad for the Giants. So I almost got these guys winning like one game, um, and that could be the Texans game. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a rough season for the Giants. I think they have a rebuilding roster. I think that honestly, what you want to see is just guys make progress this year. You want to see Evan Neal and KT play all the way through the year and make great progress. You want to figure out what the fuck you're doing with Daniel Jones. You want to figure out what the fuck you're doing with Saquon. You want to see Kadarius Tony, continue to develop. You want to see your wide receiver core continue to develop. And yeah, you just want to see the young guys take steps forward, see what the rookies you got this year, see if they're able to become, significant, starters for you, or, if they're playing significant snaps, are they meaningful? Are they quality? I think that's just one of the years that you're going to have as a Giants fan. Um, and yeah, all I'll say is it's never too early to become a Jets fan. Like, we're very welcoming over here. You guys can always become Jets fans whenever. You just have to denounce the Giants and take the Jets as your own. But I'm just saying, it doesn't look very hopeful for Big Blue over there, especially not this year with this schedule.
Just gotta burn every blue piece of clothing that they own.
Yeah, and like you have to say that Chad Pennington's a better quarterback than Eli Manning, even though it's not true. You have to say it. You have to say it.
That's fair though. It's just a passage of rights, you know.
It is, and because like those two teams are going two very different ways.
It's true. Yeah, the Jets are very much on the up and up, and the Giants, again, we'll have to see with the new direction with the new staff. But right now, they're gonna have a struggle of season. But especially if Daniel Jones is in the answer, you're probably gonna result in a high draft pick. Maybe you get your pick at a quarterback. We'll just have to see. So I think with that, that'll do it for the first part of today's show. Join us on the Mile High Fight Show, episode 5, as we go over one of the biggest cards of the year, UFC 276. With that, this has been the Mile High Flight Show, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye, guys. Thanks.